Good morning and welcome in here to Live Now from Fox. It is Saturday, August 16th. My name is Christy Matino. I'll be here with you for the next several hours or so. Thank you so much for joining us here on your weekend. We hope it's a good one. I wanted to start off with some breaking news as I'm giving you a live look at the White House this morning. We are learning Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said he will meet U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington on Monday. This all coming after a Russia-U.S. summit ended without an agreement to stop the fighting in Ukraine after 3.5 years. In a reversal only a few hours after meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin, President Trump said an overall peace agreement and not a ceasefire was the best way to end the war. That statement echoed Putin's view that Russia is not interested in a temporary truce and instead in seeking a long-term settlement that takes Moscow's interests into account. President Trump and Ukraine's European allies had been calling for a ceasefire ahead of any negotiations. But as I've been sharing here this morning, we are learning that the two leaders, President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy, are going to meet on Monday. And we do have these posts in here that I wanted to share with you. This is a bit lengthy here, but Zelenskyy was not invited to Alaska for the summit yesterday. He said he held a long conversation with President Trump early this morning. He thanked him for an invitation to meet in person in Washington on Monday and said they would discuss all of the details regarding ending the killing and the war. It will be Zelenskyy's first visit to the U.S. since President Trump berated him publicly for being disrespectful during an Oval Office meeting back in February of this year. I also did want to share with you a post here from President Trump that we are also getting in here too. He held calls with European leaders today. That was confirmed by the White House and said, if all works out, we will then schedule a meeting with President Putin. Trump rolled out the red carpet on yesterday, for Putin, who is in the U.S. for the first time in a decade and since the start of his full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I did want to read this post here from President Trump, though. He says, a great and very successful day in Alaska. The meeting with President Vladimir Putin of Russia went very well, as did a late night phone call with President Zelenskyy of Ukraine and various European leaders, including the highly respected Secretary General of NATO. It was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement, which would end the war, and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. President Zelenskyy will be coming to D.C., the Oval Office, on Monday afternoon. If all works out, we will then schedule a meeting with President Putin. Potentially millions of people's lives will be saved. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, President Trump said yesterday that he thinks his Alaska summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin would be given a top-of-the-scale grade towards settling the Russia-Ukraine war. Trump said on a scale of 1 to 10 that he'd grade the productivity a 10. The president sat down with Fox News Channel Sean Hannity for an exclusive post-summit interview before departing Alaska on Air Force One and heading back to Washington. President Trump told Hannity that it was important to make sure the two global powers could deal with each other at all, given their nuclear capabilities. Trump also told Hannity there is one yet unrevealed issue of disagreement that came up in discussions that remains a roadblock to getting a ceasefire and a peace deal. I wanted to share that interview with Sean Hannity that did occur last night. Let's listen in here.
If you had to grade it on a scale of 1 to 10?
So I think the meeting was a 10 in the sense that we got along great, and it's good when, two big powers get along, especially when they're nuclear powers. We're number one, they're number two in the world, and it's a big deal. That's a big deal.
In your press conference,
All right, and there is that post here that we are seeing from Ukrainian President Zelenskyy that I did just want to pop up on your screen here. Again, a lengthy post, but let's read just some of it here. Today, following a conversation with President Trump, we further coordinated positions with European leaders. The positions are clear. A real peace must be achieved, one that will be lasting, not just another pause between Russian invasions. Killings must stop as soon as possible. The fire must cease both on the battlefield and in the sky, as well as against our port infrastructure. All Ukrainian prisoners of war and civilians must be released, and the children abducted by Russia must be returned. So once again, we are learning this morning, if you are just tuning in, following this summit that did happen yesterday between Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Trump. We do know this morning that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will be heading to Washington on Monday to meet with President Trump. I did want to recap for you just some of what we did see yesterday with this summit. So I wanted to turn to Fox's Connor Hansen as he has the latest for us.
Talks between President Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin lasted for nearly 3 hours. The two leaders agreed they'd like to stop the fighting in Ukraine and restore Russia-U.S. relations, but there was no mention specifically of an immediate ceasefire. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin began their high-stakes summit with a handshake, but ended without a ceasefire in Ukraine.
I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelenskyy and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them.
We need to eliminate all the primary causes of that conflict and agree with President Trump that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well.
After greeting one another at Elmendorf Air Force Base, the two leaders took President Trump's limo to the summit site where they spoke for more than 2.5 hours. President Trump says he wouldn't accept anything less than a ceasefire during Friday's talks. To end the fighting, Moscow has called for an end to Western weapons shipments to Ukraine and demanded Kyiv give up territory as part of any potential peace deal.
There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway.
Trump suggested there will likely have to be some give and take on boundaries, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Ukraine won't give up any territory captured by Russia during the war.
We hope for a strong position from the U.S. Everything will depend on this. The Russians respect American strength, strength alone.
There was no word on a second meeting involving Zelenskyy, though President Trump said he'd be calling him shortly after the summit. Both Trump and Putin suggested they'd be speaking very soon. Putin even suggesting Trump visit Moscow. In Anchorage, Alaska, Connor Hansen, Fox News.